Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Cut to the Jase with NBL legend, 424 games in the league, 15 years, and of course, former Boomer Jason Cadee. Jase, welcome to another episode, mate.
It's good to be back again, and once again, I think I'm going to say it's every week. It's just another big week of basketball.
It is, mate, and we're actually got a real treat on today's episode. We've got, after the success of Australian basketball on the world stage, 6 Asia Cup wins with the 3x3 teams, the Boomers, the Opals, and the 2 under-16s teams. We've got General Manager of the COE and Performance Pathways for Basketball Australia, Pete Lonergan, on the show. Very rare to get him in the media, Jay, so it's a special opportunity. And you've got a bit of a long-lasting relationship with Lono as well.
Yeah, no, it's great to have Lono on. Not a lot of people get to hear from him, I guess, unless you're in that circle where he's around doing a lot of the stuff for the development programs and coaching. But Lono was someone who came along when I was kind of in the back end of my juniors, about 15, 16, I think I was. And if you know Lono, you know how great of a person he is. He's one of the greatest people I've ever met. And just when I was a young guy coming along, obviously my dad had a bit of a relationship with him too, but he was just someone that I just felt naturally had a care for me as a person and as a basketball player. And funnily enough, his wife was my under-18s coach, Jenny. But Lono was just someone I trusted in so many circumstances with information or things about basketball, and that relationship lives on to this day. Often with a lot of tongue in cheek, I get some very funny messages from Lono about me being at different events, but he truly is one of the smartest guys around basketball, and his care for and passion for basketball, but also for the people amongst it, is what makes him a special person.
And fits in really what we're trying to do at basketball.com.au, covering Aussies from sort of every stage of basketball. And we've tried to highlight the elite juniors coming through at national championships as well as in the national junior teams. And Alana has obviously played a big role in that. Another area is the sort of coach development space, which we'll speak to him about. But if you're an aspiring coach or someone who's trying to learn how to coach or do different things in the coaching sphere, watch his YouTube videos online about different things and how to coach kids these days and everything. It's, you won't regret it as a coach, and you'll learn a lot. But as I mentioned, a huge year for Basketball Australia on the international stage. And for you as a former boomer and a former national junior rep as well, Jace, what do you think it's got to a point where Australia's had this type of success on the international stage? What have you seen from, you're still involved in the game and everything, but what have you seen that's led to this success, do you think?
I think we've just always had such a great pathways program where people can develop. It was there when we were younger. A lot of it was built around the AIS, now the COE. But I think it also falls back to the states and the governing bodies there and the programs we put in place. There's probably more, maybe a little bit even too many touch points now in different places with all the people that love basketball and now trying to be involved in it than what I was when I was younger. But I think those programs and how they help kids develop, I truly do think for such a small country in the landscape of the world basketball scene, we do a very good job of it. And I think that's a big reason why our juniors go to these tournaments, basically ready to not only compete, but also putting themselves in chances to win. And we also spoke about the girls team that went away too at the World Cup and finished second. Like it's just a true representation of the programs we have in place that help kids develop.
We'll ask Lono this question as well, but when you see the likes of, Satya Fagan's one who's, going to make a college decision, and she's regarded as one of the top prospects in the world. And then we've had so many college stars go on. Bonnie Dees has just gone to Arkansas. We've got Roman Cialepa going to Pitt. We've just had 4 NBA draftees. When you see all that, where do you think Australia sits as far as the world landscape? Are we sort of chasing on the heels of the top sort of European programs and, becoming to a point now where we can fight the USA, which the under-19 Gems did at the World Cup as well?
I think so. I mean, you're seeing it in just the amount of kids that we are, I guess, having put in that top echelon of players. That there's Look, and being elite at 17 is very different to being elite at 25, 28. I think some people forget that the longevity and being an elite junior is one thing, but being an elite pro is a whole nother world. And I was one that came through and seen a lot of kids that were 14, 15, 16. They were the best players in the state. By 17, 18, they weren't even in the state team. So there is a big difference in that development. But for us, because there's so many touch points internationally now from a young age, I just think we are starting to, it's almost allowing Australians to show how good our juniors are, where maybe in prior years you weren't seeing them till they were 17, 18, 19. So it's exciting. It's also a whole new world for these kids to navigate. I think it's going to involve really as you're going through these processes, putting the right people around you to help you navigate some of it, because I just think it's somewhere you could get lost in very quickly. But luckily, we have some pretty good people around that I think can help, especially those who are down at the COE, as we'll hear more from Lono.
You mentioned being elite at 17. I think my elite was probably at about age 8 or 9, and then it was just sort of plateaued from there. Bitty Ball was my NBA mate, so that's where it all ended, the playing ways. But a huge show and a huge week in Australian basketball, and for the NBL as well. We had the inaugural NBL NBA Melbourne series with the New Orleans Pelicans coming out here to play Melbourne United and Southeast Melbourne. I will say I almost got the Melbourne United tip right in that one. They put a scare in the New Orleans Pelicans in that game, and what a game from Milton Doyle in that one. But I wanted to speak to you about how special that was. You were there on Friday night, did some events on Saturday, which I'm sure Lono will give you a bit of stick about. But what was that whole experience like, and what was your sort of main takeaways from the Pelicans coming out here?
Firstly, I think the Pelicans did a great job. It wasn't. I mean, it might have been, but it didn't feel like oh, we've got to fly out to Australia. It felt like there was an excitement within that organisation of being the ones responsible with being the first team ever out here, and you could feel that in the way Zion spoke, the way I think even like a Jordan Poole, you see him from afar and you think certain things, but the way they all were out here and engaged with fans and the crowd, I just think it was a testament to them as an organisation. I just think they would have left here with fans of the Pelicans now. People would have said, like, that experience has made me a fan of New Orleans. And if they're not the first team, they'll be your second team. For me, I kind of until I got there on the Thursday, and one of the first things I went to was the training session they had. So they had a bit of a training session. It was a glorified shoot around where then they had the Harlem Globetrotters, and it was a bit of an event, but there was about 9,500 people there. And I was kind of like, wait, what? People paid to show up to this? And just the way they engage with the fans, the excitement. And then that rolled over to Friday's game where sold out venue. And it was sold out like, sometimes you see sellouts, but you see some spot seats. I looked around and I couldn't see spot seats. Like there was genuine excitement in and around the whole facility. They had a big setup outside with a half court, a 2K zone. It was just like a feel for the weekend of they had 3 sold out days. The Friday, the Saturday, and the Sunday was sold out. They had 9.5, 10,000 people on the Thursday. So in terms of an event for basketball, I just think it was an elite event, and I think it was something that I hope we see more of. And next year again, one or two teams come out, because I just feel like for those who didn't go, it's something that you would plan to go to, just given what they did with it.
Did you get to meet Zion or any of the Pelicans, or even Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett, who were out here as well?
I did get to meet Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. Obviously, they were out here with the NBL, and once again, just another thing, like the way they both spoke and the way they presented themselves as former legends of the game, and it was infectious. They just love their time out here in Australia, and I think we forget we do live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. So when people come out here and they get on the plane and they go, oh, it actually wasn't that bad, the plane trip, and you're like, yeah, it's not that far. And for a lot of you, you're sitting up front, so it's really not that bad. But they get out here and they truly enjoy the people and the food and the everything that you can experience. And so, a lot of great people, a lot of I guess great connecting and showing people overseas that haven't been here before, especially NBA players, former NBA players, what a great country and how much they are truly loved in Australia as well.
Now, I did see some social clips of you at a promo event on Saturday, I believe it was. Out of anything they could get you to do, why did they get you to do a jumping challenge?
First time I've ever been asked to do it.
It was Hurls too, wasn't it?
Yeah, but Halls didn't do it. But it was a part of the Slam Pay activation. Slam Pay were doing stuff with the NBA, so you're supposed to slam your card on it. It did make sense, but I was like, geez, I'm not the right guy for this. But it was a bit of fun. Once again, just another activation that was going on around Melbourne, where they had hundreds and hundreds of people filing through this store all day on Saturday. Ray Allen was there for about 45 minutes signing and speaking. It's just, yeah, it was honestly, it was even more than I expected it to be with all the activations and all the different things going on. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mentioned it to you off air. I think the NBL or somewhat company in Australia needs to try and offer Zion as much money as they can possibly find and make him, whether it's an ambassador of the NBL or basketball in Australia or something, because I think the way he went about it, and I think it's something cool for him too, right? Like he's been through his first 6 years in the NBA where it hasn't been great. Let's be honest. He's had a lot of injuries and different things, and it looked like it was almost really exciting for him as well. So hopefully we can see him in Australia again. But the question I wanted to ask you before we move on to Peter Lonergan was, do you think this makes an NBA regular season game possible now that they've tested the waters and just seen the amount of hype and interest it's created here in Australia?
I do think it opens a door. The hardest thing that we're going to have with that is the time difference, the jet lag, and everything else that is involved. It would have to be a start of the season thing. I don't think it could be a mid-season, unless it was tailored around the All-Star break potentially. But I think they can now witness from a team perspective of New Orleans, who aren't by any means the biggest team in the world. They're not in the Los Angeles Lakers or Golden State Warriors or anything like that. But I think they've seen the love and what they could make from it out here. There would have to be, they'd have to navigate some things. If it was the first game of the season and it was New Orleans versus the Lakers, they'd probably have to fly back, have some days off, and then maybe play each other again as their second game, back-to-back games or something. But it would take some navigating. But I mean, if you had asked a bunch of people a few years ago, do you ever think an NBA team will play out here? They probably would have said no. And here we are. So I think the door's now open. It's now how we can structure it and what can work.
Absolutely. What a huge success for the NBL as well as the New Orleans Pelicans as well. It was awesome to see in our own country that we get an NBA team out here and hopefully a sign of things to come, like we've mentioned. But now it's time to move on to our special guest for the show, Peter Lonergan. Yes, welcome back to the Cut to the Jase podcast, of course, with Jason Cadee. And we've got a very special guest on today. One thing we've tried to do on basketball.com.au is bring to light the amazing junior talent we have in Australia and highlight the success we've had on the international stage as well. And we're lucky enough to have the general manager of the Centre of Excellence and Performance Pathways, Peter Lonergan, on the show today. Lono, welcome to Cut to the Jase, mate.
Thanks, mate. I feel very honoured to be with the multimedia megastar, as I call him.
Starting off on a good note, mate. But first question, I've just got to ask, as a person in your position, 6 Asia Cup wins this year in 7 months, including the 3x3 teams, the under-16 teams, and, of course, the senior teams, the Opals and the Boomers. What are your thoughts on the amazing year Basketball Australia have had on the international stage?
Yeah, it's obviously very, very exciting. And when you think about competing in Asia, it's relatively new for us. We've been in that zone probably less than a decade. And, you're in there with some superpowers of basketball. You think about China and Japan and, in the women's game, Korea. So, we're really excited. And excited that there's been such depth. We started in Singapore with the 3x3 and then into Shenzhen, China with the Opals and Saudi Arabia with with the Boomers. The young Crocs were in Mongolia and then the Safs just returned last week from Malaysia. So we're covering a lot of territory, playing against a lot of good competition and everyone's really excited, primarily for the players because they're the ones that do all the hard work.
I got to, just before Jace jumps in, I've got to mention the Gems as well. Their incredible tournament at the FIBA Under-19s Women's World Cup as well with that silver medal and pushed the United States all the way. That was obviously a very successful tournament as well, Lano.
Yeah, Renee and her staff and the young players did a fantastic job, survived a bit of a scare in the quarterfinal with Hungary on the back of some Bonnie D's heroics. And then, it was a fun journey to watch. We're all sitting in front of our computer at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning watching the games. And it was easy to fall in love with that group the way Renee had them playing.
Lono, with how the landscape's changed with Asia Cup and us being in Asia now, like I remember when with the Boomers we first went on that trip to Lebanon, it was such newfound territory. And then even back before then, there was only under 19s. Now there's 17s, now there's 15s, there's Asia Cups. How do you navigate that with juniors this age? Because we really are getting touch points at such an early age with a lot of these kids.
Yeah, Jase, well, it wasn't all that long ago. When you were on the EMUs and it was a best of three
Yeah.
qualification series, Oceania against New Zealand. Now we basically have 15, 16, 17, 18s and 19s national teams through Oceania, Asia, and then World Cup. So the good thing is it's more opportunities, more players are getting to wear the green and gold. Some of the older people and more established people, probably me included, said, "Oh, is it cheapening the green and gold?" But it's going the other way. It's there's a passion for the green and gold, just like there was when you were an emu and then into the Boomers. Now, 15-year-olds, they're bleeding green and gold, and that's just been a positive.
Would you say that, like, it's a fair point that because they get to touch the jersey earlier now than what it used to be, that it's actually just opening them up to experiences of what it's like to actually truly represent Australia? Because obviously those who have done it, at no matter what level you do it, whether it's as an Olympian or as an Asia Cup person, it's often one of your better experiences in basketball. Do you actually think that's been the feel around it?
Yeah, I think the coaches do a good job in making sure they understand the gravity of it, and that they're part of something bigger than themselves. A lot of the camps, we have Opals and Boomers greats. We had Tess Madgen and Dave Anderson and Nathan Jowar, Jenna O'Hay, Kathleen McLeod. There's just a few names that we've had in recent camps just to talk about lived experiences and what it means, talk about not taking it for granted. So there's a lot of investment in making sure that the jersey still, has that same cachet and same, I guess, honour that it did 10, 15, 20 years ago.
How has talent identification changed? Because once again, if you go back to when I was coming through, it was just the 19s. Obviously, you had under 16 state teams and all those different things. But now identifying talent / also having the coaching to go with that talent, how does that measure up? Because it wouldn't be as easy as it once was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, and I wouldn't be sitting on this conversation with you if we didn't have those problems. Yeah, look, the states and territories, as they always have, do a really good job. It's such a big country and it's such a unique geographic landscape that if we didn't have not only trusted people in state and territory high performance roles, but also tapping into, and this is probably the biggest change, tapping into, people like your dad, people's lived experiences that have been part of the green and gold. Just say, hey, what do you think? What did you see? I was in Adelaide on the weekend, and we're able to touch base with Kerry Williams and Jan Sterling, and we even had DJ in Vasiljevic, and we just have more conversations now. What are you seeing? Who's good? What resonates with you? And just relying on growing the network and again tapping into, we call it the green and gold family, which can sound a little corny, but if Robbie Cadee or Ray Tomlinson or ring and say, hey, there's a kid that might be worth looking into, we're going to do that.
Do you think ex-players play a big part, ex-players and coaches? Do you think now with how many we're starting to see across school programs, rep programs, state programs, do you think that plays a massive part / does help when you can just make those phone calls and just have sets of eyes in different locations?
Oh, 100%. We couldn't do what we do, and we couldn't, swing the way we swing at Asia Cup and World Cups without it. And a term we've really tapped into is lived experiences. We want to talk to as many people as we can with a lived experience. In other words, they've played or they've coached in the green and gold. They understand not only the honour and the cachet of it, but the hard work that comes with it and the challenges. So, just recently with the Crocs in Mongolia, Vandy was the head coach, was a former EMU. Reese was an assistant coach, Reese Carter, obviously gold medal EMU player. Jenna Hayes involved in our coaching setup now. Renee Garlop, Renee Camino, obviously was just the coach of the tournament. So we're trying to get them into coaching, not at the expense of others, but just build those things. But yeah, just being able to, reach out and talk to someone like Peach, and say, mate, what are you seeing on the Gold Coast? That southeast corner is a hotbed. What do you see? Who comes across your desk? It's just more information.
Just on that point from Jase, sorry, Lono. How has it changed over the years with what you're looking for in juniors when you're going through that process? We see obviously how the game's changed with, people use the term positionless basketball and all that sort of stuff. How has it changed in how you sort of look at juniors and what they need to sort of, I guess, do to be at that level, if that makes sense?
Yeah, Braden, it hasn't changed a lot, and that sounds a bit of a cop-out answer, but you still need an elite skill, and obviously shooting is always really high on it. But you think about Delhi. What's Delhi's elite skill? Toughness, leadership, and he's an elite teammate. And he's played in an NBA Finals, won championship. So always looking for an elite skill. What's their point of difference? Like, not to embarrass me, when Jase was a young guy, because of his bloodlines, he understood the game at a 15. He saw the game as a 15-year-old, like most 26-year-olds see it. So that was his elite skill. That you thought maybe this kid's got something to offer. Obviously, size is golden. It does, and when I say size, it doesn't have to be Rocco, but to use a rugby league quote from Bob Fulton, a good big un will usually beat a good little un. So, but, and love of the game's a big one. If you just see, one of the questions we ask is when we're talking to former players or former coaches, and we say, does this kid love the game? And do they love basketball? And some play basketball a lot and some play it well, but they don't necessarily love it. And to come into here, for example, daily training environment, to become a pro, there's going to be a lot of heartache at different times. So if you don't have a real passion for it, it's probably not for you.
How does the COE now, because when I came through, it might not be a place you, I guess, love to be at times, because it was challenging as a 16, 17, 18-year-old to be down there. But how does it affect and play a role today? Because I know when anyone asks me about my career, I say it was probably the most pivotal thing I ever did, because it took me out of my comfort zone. It taught me how to be around numerous kids my own age, younger or older by a year, and be in that environment every day. I basically became a professional when I was 17 years old by going down there. So does it still have that same impact it does to now as it did on kids my own age?
Yeah, I think it does. Excuse me. And it's done a little bit differently. Like all coaching's done a little bit differently. You're not 100 years old, but that's probably 15, 17 years ago when you're in this environment. So coaching and how we coach, how we communicate, how we hold people to account is different, whether that's the pro level, national teams, or here. The daily training environment still is the strength of this place. You're going to do it every day, and you're going to, so just by showing up every day is, as they say, the best ability. If you want to get better, is availability. So being on the floor, they're still held to account, and there's still times where it's hard for it to be a 16, 17-year-old in this environment. But I think the big thing and the most most positive thing, and this is all sport, and you would have seen it in your long career. We throw more people at these young people now. So well-being, academic, heightened sports science, sports medicine. We've got full-time resources now to make sure that the players feel safe, feel supported, get the education and those things. And that's probably been the biggest change. And then, athlete loading, so more isn't always better now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that when you were here, there wasn't understanding of load and what young bodies can do. But there's more science around it. There's just more information now. So, short answer is we like to think it's still as special as it has been in this place in its 44-year history. And we're still really proud of what it does and the young people that come out of here.
Just quickly to build on that, Lono, has the adjustments or changes with the NBA Global Academy impacted the way the COE operates at all, if I can ask that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're really fortunate. We had that relationship for 8 years, which allowed a lot of more staff, a lot more coaches, more strength and conditioning, more sports science, just more resources. The NBA operates at a little bit different budget than we do. We've had to make adjustments with it. Obviously, with the NBA Global, we had 5 additional Australians, so that allowed us to have 17 Australians. And then there was between 8 and 10 international kids. So, there was always players on the floor. Availability wasn't an issue. You've got access to, elite coaching and elite coaching resources. So, we're in that process now. So, okay, how can we replicate that without, that really significant investment? The advantage is in the men's side with Robbie McKinley was involved as an assistant coach with the Global, so he understood that. Then he moved into the head coach of the COE, so he's got a really unique lens on how we can best manage that. The biggest thing is just, to be honest, less numbers, less opportunities. You're probably aware of JK we have here, who's 7'5" in bare feet. He's a rare talent, really unique. And he's early in his journey. We may not have been able to get him into the COE without the support of the NBA and the NBA Global Academy. And, we think he's going to be a boomer and play a really high level of pro basketball. He can't help us do anything right now in terms of his growth and where he's at, but I think you probably saw in the NBL 1, that he's a problem.
Absolutely.
He's got tools you can't teach.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
For sure. Before Jase goes on to some other areas, I did want to ask you one thing, and this sort of struck me. I believe it was after the men's Senior Asia Cup. I think it was the Philippines coach said it was unfair because Australians had a genetic advantage playing in the Asia Cup. Did you have any thoughts on that, Lono? I had to try and get your response on that one.
Yeah, I read that. I've got a lot of colleagues and friends in Manila in the Philippines, and I thought it was an interesting one. You know what I did think? He was trying to get on the podium.
Yeah.
It was. I don't think he was taking a swipe at Australia or New Zealand, but if I'm him and there's pressure to get on the podium, I'm thinking, well, the best way to get on the podium is eliminate 2 that usually get on the podium.
It makes perfect sense. What I guess the next part in what has changed in especially last 12 to 24 months, college, NIL, prep schools. Getting to college is now harder for Australians, even though we have such an array. We have so much talent coming out of Australia, but a lot of colleges are now just taking 2nd, 3rd year guys because now it's not a 4-year commitment like it once was. How do we stay on top of that from Australia, where I think one of the great things about being Australian is the development we can get across Australia? How do you navigate that now?
Yeah, it's challenging, but not bad challenging. And what I mean by that is there's so many more opportunities for young people now. And what was probably somewhat of a draconian or restrictive landscape, in college basketball now provides a lot of opportunities. We don't talk to young players about what they're making because, again, I don't ask you two what your salary is. So why would I start talking to a 17, 18-year-old about what opportunities? But, we mentioned Sataya, she's going to get a great education. She's going to play at a high level and she's going to be able to really start the process of setting herself up financially. So see that as a positive. We always say to young players, it's good to have options and make sure that you can, look at everything in front of you, go through the pros and cons, just like you did when, you were talking about, starting a collegiate journey or going pro straight out of juniors. The big thing is the amount of white noise now, just trying to help young players, but also families just work through the white noise. First thing I say is, hey, it seems like you got a lot of options. That's a positive. So, now
That's
just
probably the biggest
have a
thing.
system.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. I went through it a little bit as a junior. I had some college options, obviously, and NBL options, but then even going through that process with Roman before he signed with Pitt was the amount of people trying to get access to them now, and the information they're offering isn't really valuable to the kid at all, but it's just someone trying to get in the ear and be a part of it almost. And that's, once again, I've been around people like yourself for a long time and Dad, and I've seen so many minds who understand everything around basketball. It's how kids can kind of block out certain things and who they can really focus on listening to. How do you tell kids that? Because I'm starting to have some conversations with people just through that of like, hey, listen, you don't need that now. Don't worry about it. I'm telling you, just wait 12 months and then you can worry about it. But I guess not a lot of people have that kind of resource at the same time.
Yeah. And it's good that people like yourself, with lived experiences and no skin in the game. And when I say no skin in the game, there's no monetary or any sort of advantage to you. You just want to help young people. But, I'm a dinosaur, so I still use the same conversation that you and I probably had at Condell Park, 18 years ago. Who's in your inner circle? And then outside that's your circle of influence, right? And outside that's your circle of acquaintance. So, when we're making really strong decisions around this, your circle of acquaintance doesn't have any skin in the game, and I wouldn't be dealing with them too much or putting any sort of, your circle of influence certainly get some information. That's the information source, get different options. And then, of course, the inner circle, that's the decision source, so just try and put some basic structure around it. White noise, I don't think I didn't use that term the first 50 years of my life, but the last 6 years, I think I use it every second sentence. There's a lot of white noise for these young people and their families. We just encourage them to have conversations with their inner circle and make sure they limit the circle of acquaintance.
No, that makes sense. The next thing for me is, which now as I've gotten older and I've seen more of it and I've probably been thinking more like it in the last 5-6 years than I probably did earlier days, was coaching. How do we, I guess we're entered a stage where in the NBL we're seeing a lot of American coaches or overseas coaches. So that pathway in Australia has quickly dropped from, yep, you go through the juniors, you can coach junior Australian teams, coach ABA programs back in the day, NBL jobs. Now we're seeing Japan, all these other places pop up. How do we help coaches and still show a pathway that coaching is a thing that you can do where you can help and proceed to the next level of being a professional?
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, it's a great thing in one way. We've had this brain drain. We've got really high level coaches in Japan. We have a handful of coaches in the NBA. We have head coaches in the WNBA. A lot of assistants in the collegiate ranks. And some head coaches as well. So really good opportunities for them. But it means they're not on shore and they're not necessarily impacting Australian players as we would have liked. Basketball Australia invests pretty heavily, and this is not me being a company man, invests pretty heavily in it, and I'm fortunate. I always tell people I don't really have a real job. I just get to go around and talk to coaches about how they should coach and what I think the game should look like. The good thing is now that there is more opportunities for coaches to coach full time now. Whether it's in the private school system, most major associations now are investing in a director of coaching. I think the NBL one's been a massive positive. The strong investment there. I think the standard of coaching in the NBL one is well up on what it was 10 years ago, just because it's better resourced. But yeah, it's an ongoing battle. Trying to get more former players into coaching and show them that their skill set and their lived experience is really valuable and something we need. And the thing with former elite players, whether it's yourself or Brad Newley or Jenna O'Hay or whoever Tess Madgen's moved into coaching now, is they don't need to do be at every dog and pony show like many of us used to do as we're trying to force your way through. They've already had the lived experiences, so they can skip some steps, and just trying to get them to understand that and get employers and clubs and management to understand that's an untapped resource that we need to lean into pretty heavily, rather than going offshore to get, whether it's American or European coaches who are really good, but I think we got good talent here too.
Just to build on that point, Lano, I was at the Oz coaches, the national coaches conference you guys had, and some of the guests from overseas that you had there obviously spoke about how Australia prioritizes coach development and everything. Now, obviously, it's probably been a priority for forever for you, but when did it sort of click that you wanted to try and, or needed to try and lead the way in that sort of space, and how important it is?
Well, we've been really fortunate way back to Ken Watson and Lindsay Gaze, Adrian Hurley, of course, Patrick Hunt, Barry Barnes, a host of people that invested heavily in supporting coaches and really did it for free. They knew it was important, but it wasn't resourced. Basketball Australia, it has invested pretty heavily in it. It's an easy one not to invest in. There's so many things going on. So, I think that having and now the states and territories, I think if you notice there's strong investment there too in it. So we just got to figure out what the blend is between courses, like formal learning, clinics, experiential learning, and just try and find that balance so people don't have to go back to school in essence to become a coach. We can tap into some different delivery models.
Australian basketball right now, 6 Asia Cups, we're in a pretty good place. Where do you think it sits from your point of view and your role? And also, I guess, why do you think it sits where it is right now, and where can it get to?
Yeah, obviously it's exciting times. The amount of really, really good young players coming through, and that's what it's always about. We want to make sure that it's not about coaches and administrators; it's about players, and they're the stars of this thing. And there's a high level of them coming through. That's on the back of, we've got a pretty good system. Sometimes we forget, and as Braden said, you talk to guys internationally, they're really quite jealous of the system we've got. Associate clubs, associations, state and territory bodies. I think the NBL and the WNBL play their part definitely, and those leagues are flying. So then there's a lot of excitement around that, and people want to be part of it. And I think now that players can see a pathway. Even when you were one of the best 17-year-old players in the country, having no one sort of projected you or your peers to be NBA players. Now,
No.
a kid scores 25 and they're a projected NBA player, which is is a blessing and a curse. But the fact that, earlier this year, we had 4 or 5 on one draft go in, and I think all of them are going to stick. So the big thing is young players can see it. So the old days where I want to play in the NBA, people would pat you on the head and say, "Oh, that's good, that's nice. Just make sure you do your homework, though, right?"
Yeah.
Hopefully, kids are still doing their homework, but it is a pathway, it is a chance, and I think players get that now more than ever. The role model aspect of it, I lean on you a lot to help out with different things from time to time. The answer is always yes. Mentioned Dave Anderson, mentioned Nature Wise being awesome to me in this role. Tess Madgen, awesome. Just a host of people, Jenny Screen. So I think that the players get that they're part of something bigger than themselves now, which is really cool.
If I can ask one question to wrap it up, Lono, what would be the main challenge if you could name one? The one challenge for the Australian sort of junior elite pathways to reach its potential going forward, or around sort of I guess world basketball in juniors in general. What's the one challenge you think needs to be overcome? Sorry to put you on the spot,
Um,
mate.
yeah, no, no. Look, I think more training and development, less games, and I get that games are what pays the bills, and kids want to play, but one of our biggest challenges, kids are playing in 4 or 5 different teams and programs, and whether it's a load management or just their love of the game, and they're playing 5 or 6 games a week, some of them, and that's valuable. But I think for sustainability, just strike a bit better balance there between development, training, and games.
When you say training and games, just so I can clear this up for a lot of them, because I know what you're talking about. You're not talking skill sessions one-on-one with all these different coaches. You're talking proper team training sessions. Am I right?
Well, I've got to be a little bit sensitive here, my friend. But yeah, I mean, uh, like yeah, team trainings, and something that's completely focused on development, not with any sort of outcome, whether that's win lose outcome, or it's monetary outcome. And again, that's not a thinly veiled whack at anyone, because we've got a lot of good people doing good
Yeah.
work, but it's just an environment where the kids are the focus, and their development is the focus. This would be a nutshell on it.
Well, thanks, Lotto, for joining us today and giving us an insight into everything happening around Basketball Australia. It's been a sensational year so far on the world stage, and we look forward to seeing that continue. It's a rare opportunity. We get you available in the media, mate. So we really appreciate the opportunity and hope we can have more success on the international stage. But thanks for joining us on Cut to the Jase.
No, and thanks for what you guys are doing. It's been fantastic, and again, big focus on players, and they're the most important people. So we appreciate it, and thanks for the chance to have a chat.
Appreciate it, Lono.
No worries, guys. Good on you.
Welcome back to Cut to the Jase. Such a treat for us to have Pete Lonergan on the show and get an insight into Australian basketball on the world stage. But now it's time to move on to our recap and preview of the NBL. And first, Jase, we're going to go to your JC5 points surrounding the NBL. And first, we mentioned him a little bit last week, but you're going to touch on Wildcats rookie, Jaron Riley.
Yeah, he just reminded me that I need to put him at number 1 this week. And once again, family history. I've known him since he was a little kid. I actually used to look after him when J.O. was running around the Razorbacks. But to back up what he did against New Zealand in that 6-minute stint, JR played him early in the first quarter, about late back into the first quarter the other night. And once again, Perth just looked like they are truly in the process of figuring it out, / are well away from figuring it out. They still are going through that whole, where are we, where does it fit? I just think Jaron, he's a natural, the opposite of his dad. His dad was a shooter, scorer, and he could make plays, but he was thinking score first. Jaron is trying to look after everyone else. He's a natural point guard, and with that group, he just helps them tick over, because you've got someone on the floor who's just trying to get the ball where it needs to go to, and he's not thinking any other way. Damon Lowry's come out saying, Johnny, have the nuts to start him this week. I actually don't agree with that. I think if you start to throw that on him, he's a development player. He's still the coach's son. I know he's done a great job. I would keep him in a role similar where he's now earned his way into playing minutes. To jump to starting him, I just think he's looking for too much maybe, where that role that he's played nicely. Look, if he was to go plus 20 something again, I don't think we've ever seen that before. We've probably never seen this in 2 games, plus 45 or 46 in 2 games. So I think he's done a great job. Let the kid keep playing. He's helping Perth win games, but maybe let's not throw him into the starting roster just yet, because Damon might 2 weeks to him say, "Can't believe you started him."
Well, we know Damon's going to say something outlandish regardless, so let's put it that way. But Jaron really plus 21 and plus 25 in his 2 games. Behind his serious face on the sideline, what do you think JR's been like with this start for his son?
Oh, he'd be pumped. Like imagine sitting in the crowd watching your son do that. Next minute, now listen, JR deep down would be hoping he was out there making 3 balls left, right, and centre. That's JR's inner child. But I think for him as a coach, just feeling one rewarded by giving him the chance, but two seeing him impact their team and winning, and also if you've noticed how that team speaks about Jaron. They all, when they get asked about him in the last few weeks, they all say how well he's done at training, how hard he works, all those things. I just think for JR, he'd be standing there and you'd have that warmth, that parent thing that you get where it's just like you'd be so proud, but also at the same time, you'd be just so focused on what's going on in the game. But it'd be a pretty cool moment for JR.
Moving on to your next point, we're going to go to Tassie, and what a decision this was. Scott Roth came out in the media and said he doesn't usually like injury replacement players. Of course, with David Johnson going out, they did. They signed TJ Starks, and it paid immediate dividends against Brisbane.
Well, he got on for the first few plays he had the ball, and I was sitting there with one of my mates watching, and I was like, geez. And then I think even Derek and whoever else on the broadcast kind of said the same thing, like, okay, I can see this guy's got some gears. And it was crazy how just him touching a basketball and the way he moved was just kind of like, okay. And then as the game went on, he got a bit tired. And the thing that's going to be interesting with their group is how it affects them, because they're going to have to play almost the 2 guards together at times. But, mate, he is... it's a shame that we're going to lose him to China and he's only here for this span, because he looks like he's got levels to him, and there'd be other NBL teams saying, well, hang on a second, if you're going to lose him, we would love him, because he looks like he has the ability to have 30s and 40s and really just take over games. His speed, where he gets to on the floor, his ability to create shots. I'm actually really pumped to see him play again this week. It did take away from some other people in their group, but now, after people seeing him, he's now on the scouting report, so that'll be very interesting come week 2.
Like I said, critical performance too, considering Bryce Hamilton probably had the only, disappointing performance of the season for him so far with only 10 points, and they needed to get past the Bullets. And, apart from 2 imports last year in Craig Sword and his replacement, man, do the Tasmania Jack Jumpers get their import selections right. But the next point we're going to move on to is the other team involved in that game, in the Brisbane Bullets. Jase, what did you see from them this past weekend?
It's weird. Talking about a team in this way, because they lost still, and it was a home game, and it was there to be won. But I felt like Brisbane played really hard, and they had some guys who haven't played many minutes have to really step into role. And there's a real difference. I think people get confused sometimes. There's a real difference between, I've played 20 minutes last week, but I had all these guys around me where I had to play 20 minutes and I had to create stuff. I had to actually do more than just a little role. And I actually thought some of the guys like Tane Murray and that really stepped in and showed some confidence to, like, hang on a second, I can step up here if I'm needed. Now, ultimately, they were missing too much, and Tassie had enough to get over the line. And then once again, I don't know what it looks like for them this week, but I guarantee they're still going to be missing some pieces. You still have to find wins. So I just was ultra impressed with how they played, how hard they played. They gave themselves a chance to win. But also now we've got to see it backed up this week, because Brisbane do need to start finding some wins.
Yeah, missing Sam McDaniel, who's out for 8 weeks with that ankle injury. Casey Prather was out with concussion as well. Javon Freeman-Liberty was out with that ankle concern, and we believe both of those will be back this week. Of course, Mitch Norton out for around 8 weeks as well. So really tough for them. I've got to give two points on that one. First of all, don't know whether the Tyrell Harrison layup was a charge at the end of the game, considering I think Torrey Smith Milner drew a pretty similar one that was called a block just before. And then he's copped plenty of criticism, but Stu Lash, I did see him try and take ownership of those moments in the timeouts a little bit more. Now, Vandy and that still had, feedback and contributions to those timeouts, but he looked like he stepped up a little bit more, Jace.
He might be getting more comfortable in the role too. I think there's one thing, it's still for me is maybe that's probably the amount of ownership you need to see from a coach. I don't think you can completely pull yourself back and let your assistants do everything. I'm a big believer if I was ever a head coach, I would empower my assistants to do a lot, but I think you still need to have that impression of who the head coach is, and I think he's maybe starting to do that more, whether he's starting to hear the noise and he knows he has to, or maybe he just is feeling more comfortable. But yeah, it's going to be on him. He has to lead that group. If you're the head coach, you have to lead, even if you are, I guess, giving your assistants a lot of power. And so for him, once again, it's the thing about the NBL is weeks roll in and out really, really quick, and it doesn't get any easier. And so for that group, it's the same thing. Like, no one stops playing just because you've got some injuries. You've got to figure it out on the fly, and how can you, I guess, limit that blow as much as possible and find some wins in this period when it is a bit tough.
Yeah, absolutely. But as a media website, we wanted to make sure that, when we dish out a little bit of criticism, that when someone improves or whatever, we highlight that as well. So good on the Bullets and Coach Stu Lash. Again, so many people out, and hopefully they can build on it going forward. Now, coaching is something you wanted to touch on in your next point too, with a team we've spoken about in previous weeks as well.
Yeah, I just think New Zealand's at a point now. They've got another home game coming up, and their poor start to the season, they do need to find some wins. Obviously, they went to Sydney and just got smacked. It wasn't even a ball game. And I knowing some of the people in that roster, the competitive edge and who they are, like, no one's ever happy to lose. So let's not get confused with people. But they have to find an edge. They have to find ways to win. They've lost some home games, like I spoke about. And New Zealand's one of those clubs that's trying to find itself again. I feel like they think they've lost a bit of who they are. And so I'm just really interested in where they go if this poor start continues. Illawarra have lost 2 games, but I don't see them making a coaching change. I think we all know Tatum's done an immense job with that roster. And regardless of where they end up, I think that he's there long term, as long as he wants to be. New Zealand, I just don't know if it sits the same way or not. And the next few weeks could be telling if they don't find some wins.
Yeah, just on that, I think Illawarra are probably closer to a roster change with probably Chikori McLaughlin, and I think New Zealand are closer to a coaching change. I think that it gets addressed at some stage in the first half of the season. The way I see it, I think Judd Flavel takes over. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with the New Zealand Breakers going forward. Now, last point, Milton Doyle, after his incredible start to the season, continued against the New Orleans Pelicans with 25 points in that game. He looked really, really impressive.
Yeah, I think I said before, I think on our first show, I just think people slept on Milton Doyle leaving Tassie, and maybe last year was a down year. But I've played against enough people, I've been around and seen enough people to know Milton Doyle's an incredible basketball player. And over the last few years, the amount of attention we put into scouts on Milton, it's a lot. A lot of what we talked about with Tassie was Milton Doyle. And so to see him go to Melbourne and have the start of the year he's had and the impact, but then to see him roll out on Friday night against the Pelicans, first game for them, just the atmosphere that was around, and without a Chris Goulding, like those games, a Chris Goulding is immense to it, because the only way we're really going to beat those NBA teams is if we shoot really well and we have people who make threes, because their length and athleticism startles people in the first half. All of a sudden, those layups that you think you have, or those in the key, the key gets swarmed and you feel like, oh, hang on a second, dish out. And so I thought Milton actually took it on himself to be like, I need to provide a scoring punch. I need to seek the contest and get after it. And he had 25 points. And to have 25 in a game like that, just shows where he's at mentally and how he feels in that United roster.
Just quickly before we move on to our tips, and this is the advantage of having someone who was in the league last year. Can you give us an insight into what the scout is on Milton Doyle when you prepare for him on game day?
Well, at times it was just, can we deny him the ball so he doesn't have the ball? You would try and make Milton work over time. Like, it was more of a thing of, can we take away some opportunities when he gives up the ball, not to let him have it. Going left, he likes to pull up. He likes to step back going left. Going right, he was more downhill, but he has that quick snatch back. So he wasn't really someone that you could push either way. I remember one game we tried to push him left and he torched us in the second half going left because he gets that little floater. But he was someone you just wanted to try and take away as many touches as possible. And then over the course of the game, make him defend and make him chase off screens. And can you tire him so when it gets later in games, he doesn't have the legs that he has if he's just been able to get up and down at his own pace?
Now, let's move on to our tips to close out. We'll go really quickly through this, but I just want to highlight, Jase, the poor start for me continues. I'm only on 6 across the first, what do we have, 10, 16 games. So I'm 6 from 16. You're 13 from 16. You had a perfect 6 from 6 in round 3. Mate, I'm in dire straits here.
You're in trouble, and I'm very impressed with my weekend of tipping. I got to the end of the weekend, I thought, that's a perfect round. So, hey, I'm nervous for this week, though. You look at the schedule this week, and the Ignite Cup starts, so that adds Wednesday games. It's just a tough draw, and this week's going to be tough again to tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly, we'll mention that Ignite Cup. We're filming on a Wednesday. This will come out on the Thursday. The first Ignite Cup games start tonight. 400 grand on the line, Jase. I bet you'd like to be part of that with the final on the Gold Coast on February 22. So a big thing for the NBL.
It's massive. And I think people can say what the players are talking about, that prize money. Because I remember when we were in the hub and there was prize money for that hub thing we did in COVID, we were talking about the money. So I think the playing groups, there'll be an area of excitement. They get 60% of the prize money goes back to the players. It's a great initiative. It's money. I think it'll add some spice. And I think the greatest thing for me of all of that is too that the final will be on the Gold Coast. I've been saying for years the Gold Coast and that Southeast Queensland region is ready for an NBL team, and this will show once again why it is.
Yeah, as Jace mentioned, the final on the Gold Coast on that glitter strip, and hopefully they could sell out the convention centre for that one. But even though this comes out on the Thursday, we will do our tips for the Wednesday night games. New Zealand versus Illawarra. What's your tip?
This is a hard one. Both teams are winless. New Zealand are at home, but I'm going to go with Illawarra.
I'm the same. A blockbuster one, a bit of a traditional rivalry. Sydney versus Melbourne United.
This one's got me rattled too, and it's actually my first commentary. I'm actually joining the commentary panel tonight for that game, so that'll be interesting within itself. Hopefully I'm not absolutely terrible.
If you don't get one mention of basketball.com.au or cut to the Jace on there, there's going to be issues, my friend.
Okay, I'll have to keep that in mind. I think I'll be just trying to get through the whole game first, but I think I'm going to go with Sydney, and I've toed and throwed on this, but I'm going with Sydney because in previous years when Melbourne used Shea Ili, it impacts the group massively. I still think they've got enough to win, but I'm just going to go with Sydney just because they're at home, and I think they should be able to win at home against Melbourne.
Yeah, I'm going Sydney as well in that one because Melbourne United are missing both Shea Ili and Chris Goulding. Now, Chris Goulding is expected to be back on Sunday for their match against Cairns, but missing those two is huge for them. Thursday night, Adelaide versus Tasmania.
Another great game. Tassie, the Road Warriors, but Adelaide at home, that place will be going crazy. And, I just think Adelaide's in a great place for the start of their season.
Should be the first game for import Rakosevic as well. And the thing that impressed me with Adelaide, just how well they defended against Cairns. We spoke about how that might be an issue and kept Cairns to 79 points last week. So huge win there. I'm going to go for Adelaide as well. Friday, we have Cairns hosting the Wildcats.
This is tough.
All
these games are so tough. And Cairns last time they got belted, then came out and won. I am. I'm going to go with Perth. I'm not. Yeah, I want to tip Cairns, but I'm going to go with Perth.
Well, I've got some ground to make up, so I'm going to go a little bit different because I feel that's the most 50-50 one of the week. So I'm going to go Cairns in that one. Now we move on Saturday. Illawarra hosting the Bullets.
I think Illawarra can go back to back this week. I just think they can win at home on Saturday. It's a tough schedule going from Perth to New Zealand to home. Brisbane being the fresher side, but without knowing Brisbane's full roster and who's back, I just think maybe Illawarra at home will give them the edge.
Yeah, I'm going to take Brisbane. I think, they can build off a little bit of momentum from last week, and hopefully Javon Freeman-Liberty and Casey Prather are back. So I'm going to tip the Bullets in that one. And then Saturday finishes with another blockbuster in Adelaide, the 36ers taking on the Kings.
Big game. Great week for Sydney to see where they're at. You know what I mean? United into Adelaide. I think if you're looking right now, you'd say those three teams kind of should be near the top. Adelaide at home. I think Adelaide can just get the job done at home this week and take care of Sydney.
Kendrick's return, what's that going to be like, Jase?
Now, if Trez was still playing, it would be. But I do think there's enough juice in what happened before. Now, obviously, the whole being able to use that is probably out. But when that all went down in the preseason, I got a feeling Adelaide are going to get after him. Kendrick's going to be Kendrick. I have no doubt he'll play well, and he'll be fine at trying to get shots up to score. But I do think for them to win in Adelaide, they're going to need to play the right way. It can't just be about KD. But I just think Adelaide at home, Bryce is going to be up for that. And I think Adelaide are in a good place.
Yeah, what a game that is. And Bryce Cotton and Kendrick have obviously had some great battles in the past. So that'll be an interesting one. I'm taking Adelaide as well. Sunday, New Zealand versus Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, a home double for the Breakers.
Yeah, which is handy, which is also back to JC's 5 points, why this is a big week for them. This will be, 4 home games I think they've had in the first few weeks. And I'm going to go with Southeast Melbourne. I just think Southeast can get on the road. They've had a whole week of training, played the NBA game. I think they'll be excited to get on the road and play.
And lastly, I'll give my tip. I'm going to go with Southeast Melbourne on that one as well. Melbourne United finishing the weekend against Cairns at home.
I'm going to go with United to win at home. If they do lose, like my tip suggests, on Wednesday night, I think they'll be fired up to take care of business at home. And Cairns has notoriously played well in Melbourne against Melbourne. But once again, we're 50-50 with a lot of these tips. I'm going to go with United at home.
Yeah, with Chris Golding back, I'm going to go United as well. So hopefully I can get my score up at least into double digits. I don't like my chances considering my history so far. But a huge week, obviously, in the NBL as always. But, what an episode to have Lono on. And, next week I think we'll travel into the WNBL world considering it'll be the first week of the WNBL that weekend. But a great episode, Jason. We look forward to next week.
Yeah, no, obviously exciting things. And even just going through that, there's so much basketball this week, which is going to be like another week of seeing where it all fits next. And obviously then we factor in the WNBL just right around the corner starting. So it is truly an exciting time for basketball. And having guys like Lono on today, I think it's massive piece of why I wanted to join basketball.com.au and do some different stuff. So I'm really excited for what's to come.
On that, make sure you subscribe to the Bounce Pass YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bounce Pass and basketball.com.au on Facebook. We have plenty of content throughout the week and leading up to especially the first round of the WNBL. But that's it for the 4th edition of Cut to the Jase. We'll see you next week.